Michael, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. It's been maybe like 2 years now since you were last
Man,
on.
time flies. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I'm still doing a lot of the same stuff I was doing then. So I guess it kind of makes sense that it feels like not much time has passed.
All right. Well, that was about all the questions I had for today. Thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah, it's gonna be mostly the same answers. You can refer to the previous interview.
Yeah. So go back if you want to hear some fresh questions. The second one and the first one, pretty
They're
fresh
the
ones.
same.
Yep. No, it's good to see you, man.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Now the not the last time I saw you, but the time before that, it was at that sandwich place in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh, I call it Philippe's, but that's not what it's called.
Yeah, right. It's one of the arguably original French dip spots in the world, right? That's the whole thing.
That's what I've learned since going there, since chatting about this.
Right. But there is also there's a I can't remember the other one, but there's other one that's like, no, we are. But interestingly enough, though, it's inarguably an LA thing, a French dip sandwich, not a French thing, LA thing originally.
Yeah, the other place is Cole's, and I've never been there.
I've never been there either. Good memory though. I've heard this, but I've never been there. I've only gone to Philippe's.
Yeah, and it was really nice to see you and Pearl there.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a nice little accidental run in.
Yeah, and you guys hung on to my sandwich as I used the restroom. That was very nice. I do appreciate it.
That was nice. That was nice. I can't remember what like that was a while back though. That was like, in and of itself probably a year or so ago, maybe
Yeah,
more. I don't
yeah.
remember where I was coming from or what I was doing, but I do remember that I was there.
I was there, and you were there, and Pearl was there.
Yes, exactly. It's the the people you share these moments with and
Mhm.
the French dip sandwiches that we consume.
Right, and whoever made that is up for debate, of course.
I'm on the Philippe side, but only out of the fact that I've never been to the other one, and so I don't like to believe that it was the first one. I like to think that I'm on to the right one.
Right, right. Are you a big sandwich guy? Is that
I
like
do
what like a thing that you're eating constantly?
not constantly. I feel like I try not to have like a ton of bread around the house just to try to be somewhat healthy. Well, that's just like one of those things that I try to do to be healthy because I know that I'm going to do X amount of unhealthy things. So I'm just like, well, I just won't buy bread for the house. But really, what it does is that when I go out for food, I definitely am more enticed by the idea of having a sandwich because I'm like, oh man, sandwich sounds good. And sometimes it's like, you're just like, it's pretty easy to make a pretty tasty sandwich at home. That like, Philippe's, that's a special thing. But there's other places that I go, they're great sandwiches, but you're like, really, I could just buy bread and then make sandwiches at home. But this is this game that I play where I tell myself I'm gonna be healthy. I don't get bread, and then I go out and spend extra money on sandwiches. This is the life that I've chosen for myself.
Yeah, it's a nice little game.
It is. It's fun. It's a fun game to play. It keeps you engaged in the day to day and in your life. So that works out in the long run.
Will I have a sandwich today? Probably, but I don't know when or where.
Yeah, it won't be at home. I'm gonna have to go figure it out. How about you? Are you
Um,
a big sandwich guy?
no, I don't perceive myself to be a big sandwich guy.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's not really in my repertoire. But I mean, I'm not opposed to a sandwich. A chicken sandwich. It's probably like the best sandwich, I think.
I love a turkey sandwich. I'm surprisingly always enticed by a turkey sandwich. That's all I have to say about that. But I do feel like I end up being drawn into turkey sandwiches more than you'd expect.
R-
There's other more exciting sandwiches, but a turkey sandwich oftentimes it's just the perfect sandwich.
It's a rare sandwich to find out and about, though. I feel it's not
Well,
as prevalent.
not like a leftover turkey sandwich. That's fun too, but I mean like more like, like a deli turkey carb turkey meat sandwich or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Thinly sliced, less than carved, more than carved, I guess. Yeah, that's what I mean to say.
After our run-in at Philippe's, I saw you at uh down there in Long Beach, Bamboo Club in Long Beach
Yes,
for the
this
witch
what
show.
the that was the second ever scientist and witch show. That was a good show. It was fun. Also, the day that the Edmonton Oilers, my favorite hockey team, they were down 3-0 in the finals, and that day they beat Florida by like 6-0 or something, and they managed to force Game 7. So that was the beginning of 3 wins in a row, and then they lost. But it was a really fun time for that whole tour, and that was the beginning of me having a really fun time cheering on my team, thinking that we might win the cup. So I was in a very good mood that day. Scientist was playing, it was mixing which, and the Oilers crushed the Florida Panthers. So that was fun. That was a fun time.
It was good. Has hockey been a prevalent aspect in your life ever since you were a kid?
Yeah. Like, but not like I'm not good at it, but I grew up in Canada, so it's just my dad watched a lot of hockey as a kid. I got dragged into watching it, not like forced to, but it's just on. And then eventually you realize they're like, whoa, I like this. And then just everybody, I think in Canada, it's kind of like everybody just kind of loved hockey. So it's like, especially living in Edmonton, it's like the Oilers are kind of like they're the only major team in the city. So it's just kind of like if you like talk to someone about the Oilers, like they're probably going to be down and talk about it, like they're going to get into it. So it's kind of like just it's something that kind of holds the whole fabric of the community together.
And you are one of those stitches within the fabric, keeping it
I
alive.
guess so, yeah. I mean, I have early memories of really liking the Oilers and talking about it with friends when I was like 6 or 5, or 5 to 7. It's like the earliest memories I have of it. Probably when I first started getting into it, but it was like it's just, and then but that was the same way all the way until I moved away from Edmonton, and it still is with some people that I know who are Oilers fans. I can still talk to them about it all the time. These days, me and my friend Mac DeMarco tend to go to a playoff. Like we've played LA every year in the first round since I've moved to California. So that's given me a lot of opportunities to go see playoff games between the Whalers and LA. But yeah, me and Mac go, and we have a little group chat with a few of our old friends that all talk about hockey, which those guys, none of them were into hockey when they were kids. They all avoided it somehow. I think maybe like out of like childhood rebellion. I was more easily sucked in. But nowadays they're all on it, and they kind of sort of understand what's going on. I kind of teach them a little bit about the rules and stuff occasionally, and but they get really sucked in, especially in the playoffs.
Now you are going to coach a team soon, comprising of musicians from Edmonton. Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that would be rad. We would suck though. I think that I would. I might be wrong, but I mean, between me and my two most common Edmonton alum musician friends who talk about hockey, it's Mac DeMarco and Peter from Home Shake. And again, I could be wrong about this, but I have a feeling I might be the best at hockey of the three of us, and I suck at hockey. So that's like I'm really not going to be a particularly impressive team, but it would be fun though, and it would be definitely a fun hang. I feel like they both have the raw potential to be good at hockey in some way or another, but I feel like I don't know. I've never in all the years I've known them seen either of them on skates. They probably have never seen me on skates either, to be fair. So and I do basically know, I know how to skate. I'm not amazing, but I know how to skate backwards, forwards. I can do crossovers, I can do all this stuff. So I guess maybe I'm underestimating them, and maybe they would underestimate me as well. Like maybe they don't know that I, can skate. Not amazingly, but okay. So maybe we can all skate up like okay, and maybe we could play hockey okay, and maybe it would be fun.
It seems like you are just the underdog team. I think everyone's just underestimating your capabilities
I
as
feel
a
like this
unit.
is also kind of the way the Oilers are too. So I mean, in some ways, we really are just embodying the true Edmonton underdog spirit.
Do you feel like there because Sean Nicholas Savage is also from Edmonton, yes?
Yeah, he is. I don't talk about hockey with him, but I do know him, and we're old Edmonton friends.
Do you feel like if there wasn't Mac and there wasn't Peter and there wasn't Sean operating within Edmonton at this specific time, do you feel like the music coming out of there would sound vastly different, or there would just be a different kind of feeling around that area when you were coming up and making music?
Well, it definitely would have been very different. I mean, at that time, there wasn't really, we didn't know that any of us were going to become successful. Obviously, it's
Well,
interesting that
successful musicians, you knew that hockey was on the table, but in terms of
yeah,
music,
yeah. Oh, and as I said, none of these guys liked hockey at all at that time, actually. But we were always wondering if maybe they might make a turn and just get really into it and become really good at it.
and it's
Um,
happening now.
and now it seems like they're late bloomers, but they're coming into it. Except for Sean, but he might just be the latest bloomer of them all. I've never actually talked about hockey with Sean, so I can't say definitively that he doesn't like it, but it has never come up, so I'm going to assume he doesn't. And I feel like if he had any interest whatsoever, that he probably would be on this group chat about the Oilers that only really becomes active during the playoffs. Um, I can't even get these guys into it in the regular season. I like try occasionally I text them and I just know they're not watching, and so I just wait until it gets to be playoffs again. But yeah, the Edmonton music scene was very interesting. It was cool, and obviously none of us knew that any of us were going to become, I mean, at this point in time, Mac is definitely one of them. Mac particularly is like basically one of, if not the biggest of, certainly the biggest of a certain type of indie artist that I can think of. And all of that was basically unimaginable at the time. We just kind of, I really felt like that we just had a really cool group of people that we all met through playing independent shows in Edmonton. Mac and Peter were actually like childhood friends of mine, that I kind of reconnected with more in high school, but our families all knew each other and stuff. And then Sean was somebody who was not connected to me in any way until we played some shows together. And then his project got really, really popular, like right before he moved to Montreal. In Edmonton, it got really popular. Then he moved to Montreal and then found some wider success. Um, as far as like, the style of music that's played, it's like, this, it's kind of funny because most of those bands all are from, I mean, Tops also David and Jane are from Edmonton too. But it's kind of funny because like Tops, Mac, Peter, Sean, they all are Edmonton, or Tops not entirely, but basically we're talking about all like Edmonton bands. But they all got famous out of Montreal, so it's like that's another thing, is that all of them also kind of developed the style that maybe they're more known for now. Uh, Initially at a period of time, and found their first fame out of Montreal. So sort of the weird Edmonton Montreal connection that, yeah. So anyways, it's kind of weird. I don't know if it's like necessarily representative of an Edmonton sound. And I certainly don't think if you go to Edmonton now that would be like, just you'd be walking down the street and everybody would be playing stuff that sounds like those bands. But yeah, it was weird, just momentary generation that came out of Edmonton and managed to find a bunch of success.
In terms of the music scene in Edmonton, in Montreal now, do you feel like there is a new group of people or a new kind of sound that is being uh blasted out of there through these newer groups?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. First of all, I've lived in California now for like 5 years. Um, I haven't lived in Edmonton for like 10 years. I go back to Edmonton occasionally, less than I would like actually, to see family and stuff. So I can't really speak to what's going on in Edmonton. The little bit that I've seen, I don't think there's like a lot of I don't think there's necessarily a continuity from like that time to now. I think it's, and I also just don't think that, I don't know if I've seen anything come out of there that makes me think there's some sort of strong like new sound that's coming out. But that's also just the reality of the modern world where it isn't so much localized anymore. I think even that little group of people that all grew up in Edmonton together that we're talking about, all we grew up through the beginning of like um, MySpace, and I don't even know if like YouTube was, I guess YouTube was sort of a thing. I don't remember like actually looking at it for music very much. But we were at the beginning of this internet explosion. So, but I guess what I was saying is that even though we experienced the internet explosion, we actually also had a period of time where that group of people kind of were just influencing each other more than being influenced by bigger bigger international media sources. Whereas nowadays it's just like, those guys have all created the sound. I think like those guys more than me, like Mac and Peter, maybe Sean a little bit, created this particular sort of style of like warbly chorused out guitar sound, amongst a few other people. I guess Conan Moccasin also, or Con and Moccasin, um, also maybe deserves some credit for that. But nowadays it's like, I think a lot of stuff I hear from Montreal seems to be doing like similar sound still. But the same thing is, but like that same sound is also being done by producers that are making like hip hop in LA or like anywhere in the world. So at this point in time, it's like they definitely created a certain sound that I feel like, at least for me, when I hear it on some modern band, I'm like, oh yeah, they're really doing that like Mac style guitar sound or whatever. But that could be coming from like any number of genres from any number of places in the world. And I think that just speaks to the globalization of influences and sort of also, I don't know, maybe melding together of genres. It feels like we're almost like in a post genre time, especially in the more mainstream world.
Do you feel like you've been operating past a genre in your own music?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I always say, it's funny because we joked around about how we could refer back to the old interviews, and I wonder how many of these things I actually have said before on these interviews, because there are certain things that I'm like, definitely, this is definitely one of my go-to things that I say. So I may have said this before, boiling it down like more and more to its essence every time I come across with the same idea. I may have not said this to you before. I hope not. But basically, it's just that I think I really have resonated with like the 70s as like a decade of inspiration, and not so much in the way that I'm trying to like recreate anything of that era really, but it's more about the fact that I think that there's like an element to the 70s to me that's the thing I like about it. It's that's a very eclectic and diverse time to me. Like I feel like if you look at the history of music before that, you hear like all this old timey stuff that like partially just due to like the lack of technology and also extremely regional sounds, like people weren't really hearing that much from other places and stuff like that. There's really like, you know, that era is relatively defined by regions and also just an overall old timiness from our perspective. And then you get the 60s and stuff like that, or I mean like let's say like they go to like the rockabilly early rock and roll phase, and then you get into the 60s and stuff like that. To me, a lot of that stuff feels very like defined by a genre more or less, or a time. But in the 70s, to me, is like one of the first times where I think you're starting to hear people listen back to the entire history of music and then just mix and match crazy things. And you have, you know, it always blew my mind. There's one track by Stevie Wonder on one of my less favorite albums by him in the 70s, but I can't remember which one it is. It's the final something final fulfillingness. That one, I can't remember how to go. But basically, the point is that he just has a song where he is on Rhodes piano and James Jamerson's playing upright, like the famous Motown bass player, and then Sneaky Pete is playing pedal steel, and it's just a trio. But Sneaky Pete's like the famous like psychedelic country pedal steel player from California. Then you have James Jamerson, the famous R&B bass player, playing upright, which is not his usual thing for as far as Motown went and stuff, but the Motown guy from Detroit. And then you got Stevie Wonder also from the Detroit Motown scene. But it's just like a real melding of ideas. And I just think I guess that's the way I've approached trying to make my music, is just trying to like make stuff that feels like, I don't know, just knowing that there's no like boundary in terms of like, oh, let's put this instrument on top of this instrument. Cause like to me, I think that's really exciting. Um, and I think that in some ways now it like this day and age is open to that kind of thing. Although it is surprising how much there is some elements of the music industry and some people who still cling to this idea of like, you need to put the right thing with the right thing, like if we're doing this style of music, make it like this. But I'm not one of those. So in any event, I live in my own age of post genreism, I suppose.
It's uniquely you, Michael.
I suppose so, yeah.
In terms of your own music, though, this I'm again that I think the last time that you're on here, the your most recent release just came out. Like it was only a month old or so.
Hmm.
It- do you feel like you would have made the songs from the self-titled album even 4 years before that, or do you feel like you you find certain sounds when you find certain sounds and you implement them whenever it's time to implement a new album?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you go through phases. It's funny, I haven't really worked on another solo record since then. I've done some side projects and some collaborations and stuff, and been focusing on kind of getting my studio life a little bit more together since that time. But when I was working on that record, I remember thinking it was funny that like I went from a phase of like on the previous record, It's a New Day Tonight, I went from a phase where I was obsessed with like doing guitar harmonies, like layering guitars with different harmony, like lead lines all harmonized. And that was like such a like automatic answer to like every section of every song on that record that it was funny. It's not like I didn't decide that. I would have liked to have continued on, maybe having an obvious answer to every question of like, what should go here? Oh, it should be a guitar harmony. But then when I did the next record, I tried to do that a couple times and was like, man, it's just not happening. And then it was like this weird thing of like, oh, what the fuck? What am I supposed to do now? I guess I got to do something else. And so then I leaned into whatever I was leaning into with that record, different elements of different things. Um, but I really do feel like even beyond artistic inclinations, it's like the people who you're around, whether you're in the studio with them making the record, or they're just the people that you're like hanging out with at that period of time in your life, and that like then are like, without you even thinking about it, influencing what you're into, and like, and then also like the gear that's available to you or the space that's available to you to record in. All of these things really make it so that every time you do any recording, I think that when you look back on it in like 4 or 5 years, it's really strikes you that you're like, wow, that's like impossible. Like I could know, like not only could I not make that, but like now no one can make that. Like for instance, those last two records are both. The first one was almost entirely made at the Daptone studio in Brooklyn. The second one was started there and then went through many different studios. But the Daptone studio in Brooklyn is like gone now, and the original headquarters of Daptone doesn't exist anymore. And that board, I've seen the board that we recorded on. I've seen it on Reverb online for sale, and it looked like it was in pretty bad shape. So I wasn't particularly inclined to buy it, but just things like that where you're like, and then different people come and go out of your life and there's different things. So it's just like you look back at these records and you're like, that would be impossible to make that record again. Like these things, as time goes by, something more special happens where you're like, wow, that's really special because it's impossible for anyone to ever do that again. That's just like this weird time where a certain group of people and certain environments and certain instruments and equipment was available to us and we made that record. And now I'm in a totally different phase of my life. I mean, not that you would even want to recreate it anyways, but maybe sometimes you chase some sort of element of something. They're like, how do we do that? It'd be cool to do that again. But, this just kind of gets taken over by the place gets taken by new exciting ideas and new exciting gear and processes and relationships and tend to just keep on rolling on.
With this last album, did you work on any of it in the desert, or was it written other places like in Los Angeles and in Brooklyn and in these different places before you settled down in the desert?
It was written and demoed in Montreal, basically. Right in the last little period before I moved from Montreal. I moved to Montreal later in my life, actually. Like I left Edmonton, went to Toronto, and then went to Montreal after all my friends who became famous in Montreal already didn't live in Montreal anymore, or most of them didn't live there anymore. Um, but so I moved in the very end of my period of time in Montreal, very cold winter, which it is very cold there in the winter. I wrote most of this record at that time. And by the time I started coming down to California, I wrote the very tail end of it in Edmonton, actually, because I moved all my stuff from Montreal to Edmonton, came down to California, was here mostly, but occasionally at that time would pop back up to my mom's place in Edmonton and I wrote some stuff there. But yeah, so for the most part, this was kind of a record the last record was written kind of before my time coming down to California and then in the sort of transition period to sort of reestablishing a more permanent base in California. But yeah, so it wasn't, but then I guess that I wrote a lot of it, or sorry, I recorded it all in this time where I was kind of bouncing at first, bouncing from LA over to New York to record a Daptone, and then eventually started working on it a little bit in Riverside at the new Daptone headquarters, which is really now the only Daptone headquarters, and then ultimately a little bit in LA too, but none of it. A little bit past this studio at my house in Joshua Tree, but not much because it was basically when we moved in here, which was now 4 years ago, pretty much to the month. That was when I was actually mixing this record, so I was getting mixes sent to me by the mixer and giving remote notes and stuff like that. So that was the very beginning of moving to this house, which has now since grown into a more integral part of the process of making music that I'm involved in these days. This has now become a more functioning studio house.
Will you be operating solely out of your house once you get another album going?
I think so. Right now, I'm like my biggest thing right now is mixing my partner Pearl Charles's record, who you know, who we all enjoyed the
We
Philippe's together.
we we
Um,
we enjoyed Philippe's and we enjoy your music and go stream it wherever you stream your music.
yes, exactly. And I've been mixing her last record, which that record also was made along was begun. The process was begun a long, long time ago, and this new record, it basically like when she started recording it, I think we just moved in here, but we were kind of like just starting to build a studio, and it was like, man, we could like almost just do this ourselves, but we were like, I think rightfully so, a little bit like, yeah, but maybe we shouldn't. And so this has gone through her old producer, Louis Pesikov, and couple different studios and stuff like that. But at this point in time now, I'm doing the final mix here at the studio. Because by the time we finally came around to wrapping up the entire process years later, I'd already built the studio up quite a bit and recorded many bands here and mixed many records here and stuff. So at that point, it was like, oh, I should just mix it here. So this is, and all the singles that are out so far, I've mixed, and the I'm on the last song now of 11. I just finished, hopefully, the right before I talk to you, 10, the number 10 of 11 songs. Send off a mix that will hopefully be the final mix on that one if everyone approves of it. And then I'm going to start the number 11 song and kind of close this chapter once and for all and finish this record and start to release it over the next year. But anyways, this I think is probably going to be the last time that we need to go to another studio to start a record. Now, this with me mixing it and stuff like that, I feel like we're kind of in a place where I know we can make something that's cool here. We've done some recording sessions here for so some bigger bands, some bigger indie bands, some bands with major labels and stuff like that. So feel pretty confident that we can do cool stuff at the studio that is top level quality at this point in time, which was my real concern when I was first just getting started with it, was I felt like Pearl had done a lot of stuff with bigger producers and stuff like that in the past, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I'll just do it and then do a bad job of it. But at this point in time, I feel like the only reason for us to go to another studio would be if there's like an exciting collaboration opportunity there that we're like, oh, we really want to go work with this person or just want to change it up. But besides that, I feel like we pretty much have the means at this point in time to make the kind of records we want to make and have a bit more control over how that comes out. So I think the next record for me, and maybe I think the next record for Pearl, and hopefully the next record for me, whenever those things happen, or maybe some sort of collaboration between us, will probably just be done start to finish here at the house, which will be a cool milestone whenever we finally get around to doing that.
Yeah. Do you feel like how you go about engineering and in producing or mixing or mastering, whatever it may be, do you feel like location affects that, or location is affecting the way that you go about uh either the production side of music or either or playing it?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think like essentially it has to affect it. I mean, first of all, in the sense of like just the way a particular place sounds, like the room and stuff like that, is obviously going to be have an effect on like a producer's sound or whatever. And I think any smaller label or smaller studio or anything like that, independent stuff, oftentimes has a lot of that character in it. Like, I think that probably a lot of the stuff that I was already talking about them, so they're fresh in my mind. But a lot of the stuff that Daptone did originally at that old house in Bushwick, that where they started the whole thing, they've now moved, and I'm sure it still has a lot of these unique qualities and stuff, but that original area, I think just the way that room sounded and the way that the gear that they put together there sounded and the players and stuff like that makes this like particular sound that's very recognizable. And here we have a space that we're making a lot of recordings here consistently, and I think that's going to become more and more sort of like prevalent in our sound, just the way that this room sounds and the way that we use it to record and stuff. But then beyond that, in a less like apparent way, it is also just the fact that like we're out in the middle of nowhere. We don't have to worry about like neighbors complaining. So we can potentially, we can like it can be 9 o'clock at night and like we're like wrapping up a dinner after a late session or whatever. And then we're kind of like, oh man, we could really like, and everybody's a little drunk and high or something. Or we're like, oh, but we could try that one song again. And like, maybe that's the take. That's like possible here. Whereas like if we were most places that you're going to record in the city, that's not possible. You're like kind of like, the neighbors are cool with us recording drums between like noon and 4, and even then we probably don't want to do it too much. So it is cool to have that kind of freedom. And then there's also just the cool element of being in Joshua Tree. It is like, I think to some degree that part, I kind of, it's like, it's lost this novelty for me because I'm just been living here for a long time. But I think for artists that come out here to record who aren't used to it, I think they're pretty like inspired and excited about just being in the Joshua Tree countryside and, feeling out in nature and seeing the stars and stuff.
So you can't record drums in an apartment in Bushwick anymore?
I feel like probably somebody can and does. I'm always surprised by like the people who somehow figure it out. I had a little like makeshift version of a studio in Montreal in my apartment, and that was just a nightmare. I was always like at odds with my neighbors. They're always annoyed with me for doing something at the wrong time or being too loud. So that
I wonder
definitely
why. That's weird.
that definitely added an element of like I definitely had a harder time getting into a fun experimental mindset when I knew that I was like every time I did anything I was like fuck, like I don't they're gonna be angry at me like in no time.
Um, in terms of the songs from that era, whatever year that was when you're trying to get stuff going in your own apartment
Yeah.
back in Montreal, uh, when you look at those songs or play those songs now, do you view them or hear them differently from when it was recorded or when it was written?
Yeah, I don't listen to the recordings that often. um So I can't really speak to that too much. I mean, occasionally I'll listen back to something old of mine if I'm in the right mood. Usually if I have a couple drinks and I feel like listening back to it for some reason. Not every time I get drunk, but if very occasionally if I get a little drunk and I'm like, oh, I want to listen to this.
Once a
Um
week, we'll say.
yeah. I tend to I don't know. I guess I can't really speak too much to the recordings. I think that the thing that when I play the music, when I get together and like rehearse a band and play a live show, which I don't do that often these days, but when I do it, I do feel like it's just that's a really fresh experience. Like it doesn't really have much to do with the recording. It just has to do with like, the songs and some of the parts stay somewhat the same, but the performance and stuff like that is pretty loose and it's kind of a new thing. So I do feel like in that way I tend to always be excited and have a fun time playing the music live with people. Um, and for the recordings, as I said, they do hold a really unique place because of all the factors that went into them. But hopefully hopefully other people are getting that out of it still. I just don't listen to them that much.
You're gonna start, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Do you always expect, whether it be your song or Pearl's song or somebody else's song that you kind of help create in or arrange or whatever it may be, do you expect it to change shape after a while of playing it live and say, okay, well this might it's not going to sound the same as it is recorded, so kind of
I think
adjust for that?
I think they always do change. Like I think that like they're just kind of like not to be like overly like woo woo hippie trippy, but it's like I think they do always change. They never really, and they change without you even thinking about it. Like I'll even like I'll listen to like if you listen back to like the earliest voice recording of a song that you first captured, and then you even listen to like two versions later, like maybe like 2 hours later or whatever, you'll realize that you didn't like even notice it. You just changed the melody of one part and then like settled on that for a while. But then by the time if you compared that third voice note that you're like, oh, well, that was where it really settled and I did it that way, to like the first try at a demo or the final version of the record version, they'll have changed again. And that's just like out of like just forgetting it and re-remembering it in like a slightly better way, like over and over and over again. And I guess maybe some people avoid that by more like meticulously looking back to their notes and their recordings and stuff like that to try to hold on to like the original idea or something. But I would argue that I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice if you don't let yourself forget and re-remember it over and over again, because I think that's kind of where like the slow refinement happens on like a subconscious level. And then I think that ultimately it's also another trip is like whenever you end up having to listen back to an older recording, which, as I've already said, I don't do that often. But when I do listen back to an older
Only every
recording,
week. Yeah, only,
every week when I listen back to it, I have the weird realization of being like, oh wow, like we did that on the recording, and you're like, oh wait, and then we did that, and you're like, the whole band has just like remembered that collectively now for however many years of playing it live. And sometimes you go back and listen to the original, and you're like, you know, if you had just come to the concert to see our band fresh off of listening to the record, you might watch it and be like, oh wow, they like really creatively changed this stuff. Like they made some decisions going a different direction. You're like, no, we just totally forgot it and have been doing it this way for so long and totally didn't remember that was ever, we didn't do it that way at one point in time. So that's just, but I think that's like the cool, like living organic reality of like music and art, is that it is just constantly changing and your mind is constantly changing and you're constantly changing. And so it does kind of just, it sort of always feels like you're playing the same thing, but it isn't quite really the same thing as it was 2 days ago or 10 seconds ago.
do you view these songs from this last record vastly differently than when you originally created them?
Well, they definitely went through uh well, yeah, they went through some evolution from the first version to the version that's on the record. You know, I don't know I don't know exactly how I view them. I think that there's some really cool stuff on there. I still really like it whenever I either listen back to the recording or maybe like strum one of the songs to myself if I was bored for some reason and revisiting something I'd written a long time ago, or play it live or whatever. Um, I think that at the end of the day, there is a certain element of like, one of the reasons why I don't listen back to stuff too much is because I just think that it's very connected to me. And so there's like some subconscious expectation that it should be somehow representative of me. But at the end of the day, that was like the me that came up with these ideas and somehow like went through the whole process of making that record. And basically now I just think that sometimes it can be frustrating to listen back to your old records and view them from the perspective of like kind of wishing that you would have done it differently. But really, I think the ultimate answer is to not be frustrated with wishing you would have done it differently. It's just like accept that that was like the way that that record was. And ultimately, 3 years on, if you're still listening back to a record from 3 years ago and being like, that's exactly how I want to make that record, that would be like the worst case scenario. Because then it's like, well, what record are you going to make now? Because if you just really like love and want to make the record you made 3 years ago, then like you probably don't have a lot of new ideas for a new record. Whereas, like, if I ever do listen back to the past record, the things that I would like to do differently about it, I think are ultimately just what my next record will ultimately be. Whenever I actually get around to doing that, because maybe this year, maybe this is the year, get a New Year's resolution coming up. Maybe it's time to make a resolution to make a new record. Luckily, I've been making a lot of records for other people, so hopefully it'll be somewhat familiar when I get back into the saddle and try to ride my own record off into the sunset.
Do you feel like the songs from your most recent release are well baked into your catalog now? Do you feel like it fits where other older songs are now?
Well, they're well baked in for me, but I have a bad habit of like really reinventing my live set every single time I put out a record. Like, I kind of basically like cut out like all but like three songs from every previous record at best. Some of them get cut down to like one song. Some of them I just don't even play anymore. I feel like it's my own. That's the freedom I have, in the sense that I've never had any like massive smash hits really. I think maybe the first record for Daptone, It's a New Day Tonight, I think is my most popular record. I think, from what I can tell from what the internet tells me, and that
And
record is
and
luckily.
it doesn't lie at all. So like that's all above board information. Or
Yeah, exactly. But that record is, and luckily that's only two records back for me, and I still play a decent amount, and I kind of recycle stuff. Some stuff like goes in and out of the repertoire live from that album, and it feels recent enough and more I don't know. It's a part of my like fully formed identity as a solo artist. I think enough that I don't mind kind of playing anything off that record from like at least from time to time. But yeah, the new record is like, I play the majority of the new record when I play a live show for the last few years, and then I play some stuff off of uh It's a New Day Tonight, and then I don't think I even play anything older, because that's just the bad habit that I have of not playing old shit, which is probably frustrating for some people who like those records. But so yeah, for me, it feels very well baked in. That record didn't really get like a ton of promotion, the last record, I don't think, and it didn't really particularly like take off to the same degree as the previous record. So I don't know, you have to ask somebody who comes to my shows. They might be confused when they show up and I'm just playing a record that they've never heard before and they only know the previous record and I'm only playing like 5 songs or 3 songs off that or whatever. But to me, it's very well baked in and we have a really fun way of playing it live that is exciting and fun for me.
So people should come out and see the performance.
Yeah, see all these songs, they probably have no idea what's going on. They'll be confused.
But they
They'll
like
be
them.
like,
They like
yeah,
them.
but they'll have a good time. Did you put out another album? But I'm like, yeah, I did. And these are all the songs. So that's the fun, surprising element of coming to see me play live. You're gonna find out I probably put out a record you haven't heard before, and you didn't know it existed, and I'm gonna play most of it for you. And that's the constantly renewing, exciting energy that we bring to the live show experience.
I've seen since you were last on here. It seems like you did a couple trips to England and a little bit of Europe since last time coming on here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've been to with Pearl's band. We've been to Europe a lot this year. We actually did like 3 trips, at least 3 trips with Pearl's band. I'm trying to think. Maybe the rest. I was also to Europe quite a bit with Witch, not that long ago, but that might have been the previous year that we did the last trip together for that. But yeah, we did 3 trips, 2 with the full band. Both those times we went to the UK and out to Sweden and some of the Scandinavian countries besides Sweden as well. And then the one time where we just did the UK as a duo. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. 2 times to Sweden in 1 year. I kind of was a little bit shocked when I realized that the first one was also in this year. It's been a lot of European traveling.
Yeah, you're like Lee Hazelwood, cowboy in Sweden.
That was cool. Yeah, actually, the last train to Stockholm, we definitely were thinking about that song when we were taking a train to Stockholm.
It's pretty apt, I'd say.
It did feel felt right, felt like the right moment to listen to that song.
With these trips out to England and stuff, and again, some of it was that you were playing with Pearl in within her music, and she was so sometimes playing with you with your music. Um, do you feel like there's a difference within the energy of the audience when you're playing with her and she's playing with you, or is it relatively the same in those scenarios?
Um, it's interesting. I think that like when I met Pearl, I felt like we had so many similarities to what we were doing at the time we met and continue, and obviously now we've like influenced each other, so we've been continuing on even more so. But when we first met, it was just kind of weird coincidence that we had so many similar things that we were already doing separately. Now we've come together and are doing them together. So it's like our demographic. There's definitely a lot of people who really like both bands. I think there is a slightly. I think we do have a slightly different audience, just ever so slightly. It's like just like whatever the demographic is, it's just skewed over to the side slightly, and a few people over here aren't in this one, who are in this one or something. But there's a lot of the middle that's just still the same. I think. Um, it's funny, we like one time we went to a bar out here in Joshua Tree, and these people like we were standing at the bar and this guy and this girl were like, are you guys like musicians? And they're like, oh, we love like your music. But it turned out that like the guy, they're both from Chicago. The guy loved my music and the girl loved Pearl's music, and neither of them had ever spoken about this before they both saw us, and we're both like, oh wait, I really like that guy's music. And the girl's like, wait, no, I really like that girl's music. And like neither of them knew about the other one, like, and had never spoken to each other about liking the other one. And I don't think they knew that we were together either. So it was just like a weird moment of them seeing us at the bar together, and then they explained it to us, which was funny. But I
So
do
it's
think that
it's you guys bringing people together through music, finding love,
I think
essentially.
so. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, if you're a member of one of those two demographics, like if you're someone who likes Pearl's music or you're someone who likes my music who doesn't like the other one, there's like the chances are you're going to find something you like, even if it's not like 100% what you liked about the other one. You're going to find something that you liked about the one that you liked in the other one. It's like they're too similar to not be able, like it's too similar for you to be able to like fully hate one and like the other one. I think, especially as time has gone on. This upcoming Pearl record I had a lot to do with. So if you really like my music, I would assume you probably like something about this record, even though it's not like 100% a me record, but there's a lot of me involved in it.
Is the reception to shows outside the country just different?
We do really well in Europe. I think that like there's been Pearl's previous album, Magic Mirror, did really well in the UK and kind of pretty well over Europe. And we never got to get there to like actually tour it. It was like during COVID times and stuff. So we canceled one tour that when the Delta wave came up. And that was the only one we like almost even got to do for that period of Pearl's music. So it's been kind of funny. We've like finally got over there to tour, and it's been kind of in the lead up to this record, and so it's kind of like a making up for the not touring of the last record, combined with touring, like leading up to this some single releases and the new album release and stuff. But partially because I think just because it's like so hard for us to get over there, and partially because that record's done well and stuff. There's a lot more sort of a special, exciting vibe around the shows when we get over there, and there's a lot of people. Tends to be a decent amount of people, at least by our standards, and people are really excited about us being there. I also, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like, so I think it's a combination of like getting some more coverage and press and radio and stuff over there that creates excitement, but it's also just the fact that I think we're just like, a little bit more novel over there. Like, I feel like there's a little, we're just the types of people we are and what we do and everything might be a little bit more commonplace in America. We're like, an American band. But when we get over there, there's a little bit more of like so it can be very electric. There's like there's a energy in the air when we get to play over there. So that can be fun. Which I guess this has been happening. Bands oftentimes find their audience on the other side of the pond, as they say. I don't know why this is. I think that there is a certain element of like, I don't know, when you're too close to like the same factors that maybe inspired and gave birth to whatever it is that you're doing. Maybe it's like too hard to see that as like a fresh and interesting new thing in the place where it came from, and maybe it seems to make a lot more sense to people when it comes back again from another, like once it's been seen as something special in another country and comes back again to where it came from. Sometimes that can be like, oh wow, this really is a cool thing now. I don't know. I don't know why these things work this way, but yeah. So I've noticed a difference in that way. Playing over in Europe can be really refreshingly fun and inspiring.
Where's a place that you haven't played, country specific, that you think that it would just be a nice show to play or a cool show to play?
I'd love to play in Asia. Like I've never done that, so I think like maybe playing in Japan or something would be fun. Um, I've never been to Japan. I've only been to actually Thailand, which was leaving Australia, playing with Witch, and Pearl came to meet me there, and then we flew to Bangkok for like one day, and then we flew to England for one of these European tours. But so yeah, I don't have a ton of Asian travel experience, anyways, but I'd like to play a show there. I guess a secondary, slightly less exciting answer because I actually have played there with Witch, but I haven't played a show with my own music or with Pearl's music in Australia, and I do feel like that would be really fun. And it seems like a decent amount of people like my music in Australia, from what I could gather being over there. I think there's a good scene there, and I think that there's maybe a scene that's like primed to be into the type of stuff that I like to make. So it would be fun to play a show there eventually. I think either with Pearl or with my music or whatever. But it was really fun playing there with Witch too. So I feel like my expectations are it would be fun to play there with either of our bands.
Do you like to have your foot in all these different kind of experiences, whether it be playing with Witch, playing songs that maybe a majority of them you don't get to play all that often, and then being on the recording and mixing and mastering, producing end of music, as well as creating your own music and playing with Pearl, are all these kind of things working for you and just kind of helping you be influenced from one to the other to the other to the other?
Yes and no. I mean, I like it.
That's a good answer. That's what I wanted to hear.
It is, I do, I don't know. I think I'm a little bit conflicted and like of two minds, just in general in my life. And that's probably why I end up doing so many things at the same time. I tend to like, I like the idea of doing everything, and I like the idea of like wanting to, if I've been doing one thing for too long, I kind of want to do another thing because I just want to keep myself interested and stuff. But there is also an element that drives me crazy where if I've been in the studio mixing for days on end or whatever, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna do a show, and then I like have to like get myself into like being a live guitar player mode, and I just like, and I sometimes feel this feeling where I'm like, oh man, like I'm kind of out of practice, and I like my shit's not all put together, and I got to get like back into this zone to like do this well. And occasionally in those moments, I'm like, it'd be nice just to be like a specialist who does one thing and doesn't fuck around with a million other things all the time and can just actually like, when you call me to be a guitar player, it's like, yeah, of course, I'm a guitar player. I play guitar all the time. But
Of course, I'll
sometimes
do
I'm like,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But sometimes I'm like, no, I feel like I'm a mixing engineer lately, and suddenly I'm being asked to go out and be a guitarist. But I think that at the end of the day, though, that's the slight drawback, and I think the positives are more plentiful. There's many positives to being able to like do many different things and learn stuff from so many different groups of people that I've worked on music with and stuff. So I think that um keeps me fresh and inspired and stuff like that. And it also just keeps me like, I do really just, at the end of the day, I guess the most important thing is I want to keep my hand in with music, and I want to be making records and playing shows and stuff like that. And in order to keep doing that in a somewhat, full-time sort of way, it just kind of, in this day and age anyways, or like unless you're in like a massive band, it requires this much diversity and open-mindedness to doing different things to be able to keep doing it in a serious way. So I'm grateful that I'm able to like keep my hand in as much as I have over all these years.
Does anything outside of music tend to inspire you to make more music or work on music in a different way?
Yeah. I mean, music is definitely the biggest inspiration itself, but at the same time, I think that if I'm reading more, which I sometimes am, like many people in this day and age, I think I get lazy and sometimes don't read as much as I should. To me, I think that whenever I'm reading more, if I'm finding good books to read, that tends to be one of the more inspiring things that I can do. And I have a theory about why that is, and I think it's because it doesn't cost a lot of money to write a book. And so I think that if you find a really good author who has really interesting ideas, like it's just one person with really interesting ideas, it's one of the most pure ways to like absorb their viewpoint. They didn't have to like go out and like make compromises of what, like, write in like some like goofy character that the studio wanted or whatever, like it is when you like are watching a movie or a TV show like 90% of the time or whatever. It's like, so I think that that is something that I think it's important to like get that raw input from like, incredible visionary artists that's not tampered with and isn't like cut with a bunch of like commercial sacrifices. If you're reading like a really great author, I think you're getting a very pure artistic statement. So I think when I'm doing that, that can be massively influential and inspiring. And I think movies can sometimes be very inspiring too, but I do think movies, for the exact same reason that I said books are good, movies are bad a lot of the time, because of the fact that I just feel like it's so rare that you get to see a movie where you're like, or a TV show, or just any big like visual and audio production altogether, like these things are so rare that you watch one that you're like, whoa, that was just a really great creative statement from someone. Like 90% of the time, you're like, I think there was something that was cool there, but like there was a lot of other stuff that had to be done to like appease, various investors or something, that made it sort of a little middle of the road by the end of the day. But that's just this is my pet theory that I have right now.
Going back to the influence of books, do you think there's something to say about it being a completely visual thing that you don't have to listen to anything at that moment? You're just fully absorbed visually?
That could be it. Yeah, I think that that could be that probably might be that's an interesting insight on your part. It might be it might be refreshing for me as someone who has to spend so much time with their ears to just like intake for with the eyes instead. I think also just the fact that it requires a certain amount of concentration and a certain amount of solitary focus. And like obviously we all, it's like, you can get distracted and read a book, but you're gonna have to go back like 4 pages and realize that you weren't really actually paying attention, and you were just scrolling through and thinking about something else or talking to someone else or whatever. Whereas scrolling through and thinking about something else and talking about something else is just the way that we consume like 99% of the stuff in our lives at this point in time. Like we're just brain dead, doom scrolling, or even just like, watching a shitty TV. Like, and I'm talking about myself. This is no criticism of anyone else. It's like I do this way too much. It's like watching some TV show that I don't really care about while I'm like scrolling through my phone, looking at shit that I don't care about. And so it's nice to like if you like really are like enjoying a book, it's cool because it actually requires you to like it's one of the few mediums I can think of that you actually have to listen to it or like and actually sorry pay attention to it, listen to it. It's in your head, you're not listening to it, but you actually have to pay attention to the words, get into it, imagine what's going on in the situation. This is 90% of 99.9% of other things don't really require that from you. You can basically just kind of zone out and be like, yeah, I saw that TV show. I don't really remember like anything about it, but I saw it. I definitely was in the room while it was playing.
Is listening to an audiobook the same as reading the book?
I think that can be really cool. I mean, it probably has more room for spacing out and not paying attention to it at the same time. But I do love audiobooks, and I think that it's a cool way to, especially as somebody who drives a lot on tour, it's nice to listen to audiobooks because it's nice to feel like someone's just telling you a story. And I do oftentimes take that in pretty well, I think, because I'm like not really able to focus on much else, so I just listen to that, and that's great. I don't think it's the same, but I do like it, and I do use that method at times.
Going back to working on the other side of the board, engineering wise, what is that process like? Do you kind of approach it the same way as if you were recording something for your own project or Pearls's project?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's a different process. It's interesting because even if I actually really love just engineering and producing and not playing any instruments, especially when like the initial live recording is done or whatever. Um, but like it's funny because I can engineer myself, but I'll just have to bounce back and forth between an instrument and behind and being in front of the speakers. So I'm a little bit less hands on in terms of the production if I'm actually playing all the time. I love actually just sitting there and in front of the speakers and watching a recording kind of get made, listening to the recording happen. It's like that's a as someone who's oftentimes been a player and been in the other side and then had to have that moment later when I come back into the control room and then be like, oh, well, play me what you guys were listening to or whatever, which is magical in and of itself. But it is really magical to be like you're listening to it in the moment and it's like sometimes it just really happens in a way where you're like, this sounds like it's like a record. Like obviously we're gonna mix it more. It'll get messed around with a bit more than just this, but the basic elements are kind of just happen, and that can be really a magical and inspiring thing. That yeah, I haven't always been able to be that if I'm the one who's in the other room playing the instrument. So I really do enjoy that side of it.
Is there a different sense of excitement from both of these angles?
Yeah, I guess there's a different sense of excitement. I mean, I kind of feel like as far as like sitting with like headphones on in a studio playing, like that can be exciting, but I think sometimes that excitement is sort of like delayed until you actually get to like listen to it properly. Sometimes the way that you're monitoring on headphones and stuff in a studio situation isn't really like the most inspiring thing in the world. Sometimes it's kind of just like, okay, I can tell what everyone's doing. I'm playing. I can get basically like we're playing in time. I think that was pretty cool. When you get back in and like listen to it on speakers properly in the control room and hear how they're kind of mixing it on their end and stuff, you're like, that sounds fucking rad. But that's the cool thing about being an engineer is you get to like hear that in the moment and like make that happen a little bit. I mean, obviously it's the players who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, but you get to like kind of like set up the sound the way you want it and you're like, wow, this is really working. And so sometimes in a studio as a player, the magic is kind of not so much while you're playing, which can be a little bit, which I guess that's why I kind of appreciate the process of being on the more magical side of it more often sometimes as an engineer and producer.
Is there a point that you get to with each record that you're either working on the side of recording it or on the side of mixing or mastering or engineering it that you feel like now it's done? Like we're over the hump of it kind of getting to that point of completion and now it's completed.
I think I'm like maybe getting a bit better at knowing when that is now. Um, I think I think it's gotten easier to being more in control of my own process of like how I like to record and how I like to mix and sort of having my own studio and stuff. I think sometimes it was a little difficult in the past because as someone who was collaborating with producers and collaborating with mixers as an artist, it's like I'd sometimes be like busy. I was always very involved in the production and very involved in the arrangement, particularly. So I'd be busy like adding things and taking things away and doing things on that side of things. But I'd always have this sort of like question mark of like, well, how much of this is going to just be like, maybe it is done by the time you mix it, but how much are you like wanting to change with the mix because it doesn't feel quite done yet, but maybe it's just the mix. So should I add another thing, or is that let's just like overkill, or is it like perfect the way it is now once it's mixed? Whereas now I think like because I'm more and more hands-on and doing all that stuff, I have a bit more of a sense of like, oh yeah, I mean that's gonna, the artist might be like, oh, I don't know, like is it like finished or like done enough? And I'm like, oh, it's gonna be finished when it's like right now it's not mixed. So once it's mixed, it's gonna sound like whatever it sounds like. It's gonna sound like 10% more that, and it's gonna be sweet. Um, but so yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit better at knowing like when something's done, but it's never really truly done until it's finished being mixed. And mixing is definitely can be very, very fun, but especially for projects that have been around for a long time and been worked on for a long time, it can be a little bit, it's like a heavy, can be a little heavy sometimes. There's a little bit of like a finality to these big projects where suddenly you have to be the person to like be like, this is the way it's going to be at the end, done, it's over. And that for some reason is a little bit daunting at times, but that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited to be almost completely done this epically long recording process for Pearl's latest record. And hopefully this will be the beginning of a period of time where we're able to do some stuff a little quicker and maybe get some stuff out a little faster for the next little while. That'll be, and that's been a big impetus for having our own studio, is hopefully being able to like actually just crank some stuff out for the next little while. It's just nice to be like, I think whatever we make next time, it's like it's going to be a little bit easier to be like, oh, just got to get the band together, get them in here, record something, and then I just got to mix it. And that's not the hardest thing to do in the world. It's a little more difficult when you're really trying to really working around a bunch of other people and a bunch of other studios, and the studios got other people booked and the producers got other people booked. It's nice to kind of be like, no, it's just us. We just got to make some records. And it isn't that, it's not really rocket science in the sense like it's not crazy to think that like look at the bands who've really cranked stuff out, like Mac DeMarco has cranked out tons of material. He has his own studio. This is, so anyways, I was a little slow on the uptake on this particular lesson in life, but I finally figured it out, and I feel like I can actually kind of join the ranks of the people who are just cranking out material, and I'm looking forward to it.
And I'm sure that they're glad to have you on there, on their roster, on
I,
their crew, in their crew,
and also on the hockey team.
and also on the hockey team, of course. You and Pearl are creating a new record label, yes?
Yeah, Taurus Rising Records. Yeah, which is this, I guess this is Taurus Rising Studios, where we have this is what we call our
Uh,
house. This is also just our house though, too. But that's also it's also
also,
Taurus Rising Studios.
AKA House,
Yeah,
AKA House.
exactly.
And is the inaugural release going to be this upcoming Pearl album for the record label?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, that's gonna be the first one, and there might be some other stuff shortly after that, but I'm not really 100% certain at this point in time. But yeah, it'll be definitely Pearl's record is gonna be the inaugural release, as you said.
I'm pretty sure I used that correctly. Yeah.
I do believe you
In
did. I think you
inaugural. Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't, though, I mean, it sounds good that when we both say it, so that's all right. Hey, there you are. You're
Hey, wait,
finally.
why did it do it? That's so stupid. How the hell? All I had to do was close the window one time and then it came back the right way. I don't understand.
I've been staring at you like this the whole time, but
I know, me
hey,
too.
it's
I don't
it's
know why that was necessary. I guess I know what the trick is now.
it's great to see you though, Michael.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh man, whoo!
This is the control room, Taurus Rising. We've the whole house is really a studio. The only place we don't generally record is in the bedroom, but I also am actually tempted to try to expand into the bedroom more because the bedroom has really nice sliding doors that would feel very much like a studio that you could look out as an isolation booth. But generally, we haven't invaded that one part of our lives yet when we have people over to record. But I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of that one private zone and make it public as well.
Yeah, it's called breaking down walls, and I'm
Yeah,
glad that you're doing it.
exactly.
Michael, I do appreciate you coming on here, but
Thanks so much for having me, Gavin.
let's do this promo real quick. We got Pearls' new album coming out, the inaugural release for the new label, and that is April of 2025. So everybody can keep an eye out for that. And there is an Instagram for the record label as well. That'll be linked below. And are you, because this is coming out on Friday, so is there any upcoming gigs that we got to promote?
Um, no, we're taking it kind of slow right now, but around April, there's going to be some shows around the West Coast for the record release stuff, and then we're going to be doing some stuff in Europe as well. So keep an eye out for then. That's kind of the most official run of shows. I'm sure we'll show up somewhere, humming and strumming around between now and then, but that'll be the real run.
Heck yeah. People can follow you Instagram to keep up to date with your stuff. It's at Michael Rault _Rault.
Exactly.
There's no other underscores, right? It's just
No,
that
just
one.
one underscore,
Right
which I
on.
actually don't even think I needed to add in retrospect. I think I just put it for some reason. So it just made it more complicated for no reason. But that's the way I like to do stuff, you know?
Keep everybody on
Yeah.
their toes. And yeah, the newest release, the self-titled is through Wick, right?
Yes.
And that'll be linked below of whatever you listen to this on, and go follow it. And it links to the Bandcamp, which I'm assuming is at michaelrault.bandcamp.com. Again,
I
that's just
believe
off the
so.
top of my head, I think. Whatever the real links are for all these,
They'll be
including,
listed.
yeah, yeah, including
We can't just be expected to be link machines. You got to look at the bottom of the thing. That's where you find the stuff. You don't need to do it again. It's
got it
fine. These
got it up there.
everybody knows what it is.
If you don't know what the links are, oh,